Welcome to the Especially for Athletes podcast, where we explore essential principles that empower athletes to learn life's most valuable lessons through sports.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Especially for Athletes podcast. I'm joined today with two friends of the program. Both of our guests today have been on the program before. They were not on at the same time, however, and I thought it would be awesome if I could get them both on at the same time and talk about some things that they both have in common. So today we have former professional NFL quarterback, Division I quarterback at BYU, Brandon Doman. Brandon was also a longtime quarterback coach at BYU. Good friend of mine since the early 90s. We've been friends for 30 plus years, very good friends, and always are close to the both, especially for athletes and to the my quarterback elite program. Brandon's been awesome at helping with both. And then Justin Miller, who now works for Especially for Athletes and for quarterback elite. Justin came up in the QB elite and Especially for Athletes program, went on to play at Snow College at Southern Utah University, where he had a very successful couple years. And then he played over in Europe, where he was super successful as well, being the German League MVP. So Justin, Brandon, thank you. Thanks for hopping on, and let's hop right into some questions. So Brandon, I want to start with you. And let's go back to, we'll kind of work through up into your coaching days. But when you were playing, because Justin, you'll have some similar experiences. Both of you guys came up, but out of high school, you had two different sort of paths, I guess, to college. Justin, you had to grind it and just, plow doors down just to get into, get on a team and have a shot. Brandon had to do that as well, but Brandon had a lot of interest coming out of high school. Had offers from all over the country, from big time schools. Brandon settled at BYU, but then it wasn't easy, Brandon, when you got to BYU. It wasn't like you were right there in the mix. You were going to be the guy in a year or two. You were pretty, you were down the depth chart and had to kind of work your way in. So I want to kind of talk about what you learned from that experience that might help another, a young athlete who maybe is finding himself as a backup. But, what did you learn from that experience? You eventually ended up starting. And when you had your opportunity, especially your senior year, dominating. So walk us through that and give us some counsel.
Oh, I look back in high school. I think I was one of the luckiest quarterbacks in the country and just one of the luckiest human beings in the country to be able to be surrounded by so many unbelievable just high school friends and high school athletes, and a culture and an environment where we were trained to be excellent. And our high school coach, his name was Roger Dupay, in the early 90s at Skyline High School. It was about as good of a high school football experience as you could create for anybody. So I look back at that, and then I fast forward throughout the years. And there were times when I was in college and thinking, well, gosh, this is what we did at Skyline back in the day. How come we're not doing it here? And I felt like I came from a culture of excellence, a culture of preparation, a culture of, if we do the small things right, it'll translate into future successes. So simple successes over time create the miraculous big events, and preparation plus opportunity equals success. So you can't truly become great, or you don't get to accomplish what you've set your mind to unless your heart believes it or you've truly done the work. My dad and brothers, and I was raised in an environment that if your mind can conceive it and your heart can believe it, then you can achieve it. And the hardest thing to accomplish is to get your heart to believe it. And in high school, we just learned we're going to be there at 6 a.m. We're going to grind through the work. We're going to be diligent to the coach's requests. We're going to tackle and block and do all the things better than anybody else was doing it. And I learned that in order for me to become what I needed to become, I had to do all the little things right. I had to do the things off the field that I knew I needed to do. I needed to spend the time in my own personal life, doing the things that I needed to do. I needed to, in order for me to be the person I wanted to be and to be the football player I wanted to be, it wasn't just going to be me lacing up the cleats and walking out on the grass and doing the work there. I felt like there were so many other things I needed to do in my life in order for me to accomplish the goals I wanted to as a student athlete and ultimately as a quarterback. And so I think that's how I would start this, Dustin, is just that nobody is going to hand you anything. Nothing's free. It's going to require everything you got in order to accomplish the greatest successes in your life. And there's going to be hurdles and walls and unique challenges and injuries. So many things that are going to obstacles that will come in front of you, and you're going to have to decide how bad you want it. And if you truly are going to exhibit this personal grit and stick-to-itiveness, this unconquerable spirit that no matter what, I know where I'm going, I have the end in mind, and I'm just going to keep believing, and I'm going to keep moving in that direction. And for me in my life, it has not just become true, it's become foundational. It's almost like this earthly truth that when I say preparation plus opportunity equals success, it's an equation that never fails. And now that you got more gray hair than I do, I have no hair. That truth is even more foundational in my life for sure.
Yeah, Brandon, you were when you got your first chance at University of Utah your junior year. No, your first start was at Colorado.
Yep.
But you played in that up at the University of Utah was sort of your big kind of coming out party, I guess. Like you scored late in the game. It was a typical BYU Utah rivalry game that came down to the last second. You know, if I took you back a couple weeks before that first start in Colorado, if what I'm hearing is correct, what you're saying is you were preparing, you were controlling what you can control, and that was the preparation. You couldn't necessarily control when your opportunity was going to come. Somebody else had to make that decision. But your only option was to quit and say, all right, I'm sick of preparing for something that I don't have a promise is ever going to come, or bust my tail and prepare as if my opportunity is going to be tomorrow. And I got to be ready so that when that opportunity does come, I can strike. Because that's, what you say is absolutely correct in that equation. However, when that opportunity comes, you may not get a lot of them, and you got to be ready to go and show when it comes. Was that sort of your mindset? Is that what?
Yeah, you have to pounce immediately. You have to pounce when it shows up, and whether it's an athlete or it's just a person in life. And you're right, the opportunities, and sometimes the opportunities are different than what you expected. So even though I may have been preparing for this opportunity, I may have been given this opportunity, but it was equal as great, if not greater, than what I had been envisioning in my mind was going to be the outcome of this. But regardless, the opportunity came. And if the preparation exceeds the opportunity, then sometimes the success is wild. It's beyond your wildest imagination. But at a minimum, if it's equal to the opportunity, then the equation of success is there. And I was grateful. I was grateful when it came. My grandpa called me on the phone. I've told this story 100 times. I was in the hotel the night before the Colorado State game. I was not the starter. Charlie Peterson was the starter. My grandpa calls me on the phone. He's probably 85 years old at the time. And I pick up the phone and in the hotel room, right? We pick that up. It's ringing. I'm like, who's calling in my hotel room? And I said, hello. And all he said was, this is Clifford Gledhill, the grandfather of Brandon Doman, the starting quarterback of BYU. Click. And he hangs the phone up. He was living in St. George at the time. And I'm like, my dang grandpa is trying to teach me a lesson right now again, because he was that kind of a guy too. And it wasn't hello. There was no conversation. It was that. So I opened my journal up and I wrote down again, I, Brandon Doman, am the starting quarterback at BYU. I wrote it 3 times. That journal sits by the side of my bed still to this day. And he was reminding me, Brandon, don't give up. Don't quit. Your mind has been seeing this for a long time. don't stop believing. And by halftime of that game, I was the starting quarterback at BYU. And why? Because they all got hurt. It wasn't like something, Lavelle Edwards had to come in and say, Brandon, you're the starter. But gosh, Bredingham got hurt, Charlie Peterson got hurt, and I was the third string quarterback. So that sometimes, and usually that's how it comes about. Circumstances in other people's lives or other situations change, and then all of a sudden you're standing there. And I happen to be standing there. And thankfully I was ready.
There's an equation that I've used before, and I'm trying to remember. I feel bad that I can't note who it was that came up with this, because it wasn't me. I'd like to credit whoever it was, but I have used it a lot. Event plus response equals outcome. So E plus R equals O. And and I think that goes for everything in our life, right? We have the event, whatever that is, and then the next thing is just how we respond to that event, and that's what ultimately determines, the outcome. In your particular case, you remind me of something I heard Kobe Bryant say that I just loved. I may have to get it printed and hung in my office or something, but he talked about non-negotiables and how he would not negotiate with himself. And what he meant is similar to the old adage by the Native American chief Sitting Bull, who said there's two dogs in every one of us. They fight each other every day. The dog that wins, the alpha dog, is the dog we feed the most.
Yeah.
One we give the most attention to. And in Kobe Bryant's mind, there was no negotiating with, well, maybe I feed the other dog occasionally. It was, no, like I am getting up at 4 a.m. and there's no negotiating. And my workout is what it is. And once it's written down on paper, or once I've made that commitment, I think that's what, Brandon, when you talk about if your mind can conceive it, well, I think that's the easy part. The hard part is, does your heart really believe it? And that's where you have to, I think, practice this non-negotiable of, if your heart really believes it, there is no plan B, right? It's all in on plan A. And if plan A doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I'm going to be ready that if I get my opportunity to execute plan A, that my response is going to be such that the outcome is, hopefully positive. If not, at least I go to bed knowing, hey, I had my chance. I gave it all I had. It didn't work. Right. And that sucks, but that's sometimes life. But, I think, and you can tell me if you agree with this, and then Justin, I know you have some similar experiences. The biggest regret would be negotiating with yourself, kind of being ready, knowing you're not quite there because you gave a 90% in your preparation because your heart didn't really believe it. It was just something you kind of wanted, but you didn't sell out on it. And then that opportunity came and you weren't ready. And then you go out and you have to live with the rest of your life knowing I didn't really prepare myself. I think we all can try to convince ourselves we did, but in our hearts, we know you didn't really believe it, right? Like you negotiated with yourself out of some workouts, out of some study, out of some sleep, out of some whatever it is. And it's the same in life, right? That's what I love about sports is it's so applicable to the same negotiations happen in our life, right? The same kind of believe in it with our heart. But we don't sell out on it. And we feed the other dog too much. And sometimes we feed it enough that we become the other dog, the lazier, version of ourselves versus the killer version of ourselves. One more, Brandon, and then I want to kind of, Justin, because you had some similar stories. So Brandon, your senior year, you get that, you play that game against Colorado State. I remember it. So I was like doing cartwheels in my house when you got in. He was the Subway player of the game. I still remember, like, wow, how cool is that? He's the Subway player of the game. Like Subway recognized him. Like that's where, man, this is my guy, and he's so happy for him. And then it was just like, you just steamrolled everybody. And senior year was unbelievable. You guys go like 10-0 to start the year. You're, talking about you in the Heisman race, like it was nuts. So and then you finish it up and you get drafted. You get drafted by the 49ers. So let's fast forward to that. Where was your mind at when now all of a sudden you realize, holy cow, I did it. Like did it. Not just starting at BYU, I'm going to the San Francisco 49ers. And at that time, Brandon, I mean, I think you believe we were 49. That was kind of our team, and a lot of us in Utah, right? That's where Steve Young played. That was close to us. Tell me about that.
Well, I've thought a lot about this over the years because I look back, Dustin, at being 8 years old, and we were watching Jim McMahon and Steve Young and Danny Ainge and Danny White and Michael Jordan. I mean, it was an unbelievable time. But for a young kid from Utah, there wasn't anybody bigger than Steve Young for me. I mean, the 49ers were just it. But quite honestly, I got to be honest with you. I don't think that in my brain anything was bigger than
Really?
BYU football. Is about as big as it could get in my brain. The BYU quarterbacks and BYU football, I wanted so badly to be the quarterback of BYU that I didn't even think about anything beyond that. You know, it was like, if I could just get into that stadium and run out of the southeast corner end zone with the fog and the smoke going, and I get to run out in that field with the BYU jersey on, and I'm the quarterback of BYU, that maybe that was the pinnacle of everything. And what was amazing is that when that happened, the fruits of that labor then just have been a steamroll in my life. I got to go play. I got drafted in the NFL because, I was the quarterback for BYU, and we won a bunch of games. And I look back at that time in the NFL, and I needed some things to go differently and a couple things to change. And I look at my approach. You know, there's a lot of things that maybe could have been differently, but I worked my tail off out there in San Francisco, and I was never a starter in the NFL. But the impact of being the quarterback of BYU in my life, now that I'm almost turning 50, has been a miraculous blessing in every way, in every facet. There's tentacles coming into my life as fruits from that time that have blessed me and my family that I'll forever be indebted to the experience. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that really was the opportunity that I think I wanted so badly. And you look back years later with perspective, and, you know, heaven and earth intertwined in my life, I think. And that was the opportunity that truly has impacted and blessed my family, my wife and I, and our kids for all these years. And even professionally as I go to work every day. And I'm just so grateful for BYU, for BYU fans, and just the whole thing. So I think we have to be really careful about what it is that we read, and be really smart about what we're earmark goal. And San Francisco was unbelievable, great people, but it was a fruit that came from, I think, the goal of being the quarterback of BYU.
I think that's interesting because I think sometimes I found myself doing this not long ago. I mean, it was a year and a half ago, where I was kind of feeling like, man, I'm not and it's good. I mean, in some ways it's good. It's a motivator, but I just felt like I'm not doing enough. I haven't done enough. I need to do more. And, you know, it's easy to fall into the trap of negativity there. Like you can be really hard on yourself. But then I heard somebody talk about something to the, you know, your wishes and dreams 10 years ago. And then you're playing them out oftentimes now. Right. And I look back and I was like, man, if you'd have told me 10 years ago that this would be the case with, you know, work, with family, with other things, physical, some health stuff, like I'd have been like, really? Like, are you kidding me? That's going to be in 10 years from now? Okay. Yeah. And then when they happen, like I would ever want or ask for another thing ever again in my life. Like I got it, right? But what we do is we fall into the, well, now what? We want more, or we always want more. Maybe it's the selfishness or the greed, and I'm careful on this because it's also a good thing to want to, you know, find something else to stretch for and to reach for and to motivate you and push you. But I think that's interesting that you say that your sort of Mount Everest was BYU. That was the cutout picture on your mirror in the bathroom was that, and you wanted that every day. And so when you got there, instead of thinking, okay, great, enjoy that for a day, but now I've got to be this, you soaked up the fact that I'm a Cougar, I'm doing it, I'm living my dream, and I'm going to go all in on this. And it's probably the right approach, Brandon, because you went all in on being now trying to become the best BYU quarterback that you could be. The other stuff happened. The San Francisco 49ers call came. But if you're focused, I think if we're focusing on next week or next month too much, we blow it today, and we miss now. And I think that's the idea of our principle of winning the hour, that you be where your feet are, and your feet at the moment were BYU quarterback. You could control that. And if you controlled that and had some success in that, other things may come. And they did. And you had a chance to go, play in BYU and then go to Buffalo and then get into coaching at BYU, and all these things opened up. But had you immediately switched your mind to, all right, I'm going to be, starting NFL quarterback, you may not have been the college quarterback that you were, because your eyes got off the goal, right? Is there some truth to that, Brandon? And then Justin, maybe I'll get your thoughts on that.
No doubt. Yeah, I think you said it beautifully. I don't think I'd said it any differently. I 100% agree.
And I think that's easy. I think it's smart sometimes in life to take an inventory of kind of what we have, where we're at, and then maybe ask ourselves, if I could go back 10 years from now and see in a crystal ball or something where I'm at now, would I be okay with that? And would I be happy with it? And then maybe realize, maybe in a spiritual sense, that God did play a part in my life. Like, he did answer those prayers, or he answered them differently than I wanted, but man, I'm glad he did, because looking at it now, I'm glad I didn't get some of those things. The course correction actually took me this way, which was better. And I think it's the same thing in sports. So Justin, when you came out of high school, there were some colleges that were interested in you, but they weren't knocking down your door to commit to go to BYU or, Michigan or somewhere. You had to kind of grind it in high school. You went down to Southern Utah. Did you walk on at Snow?
I was on scholarship at Snow. That was my only offer out of high school, and then went on a mission. And when I came back, walked on it. So
hurt your hand, your wrist. Had to deal with that.
Yep.
And went down and walked on at Southern Utah. And I'm guessing when you got down there as a walk-on, similar circumstance to Brandon, in that you were down the list a little bit, right? I know you had a couple other guys that I've worked with that you knew well that were down there, but you had to kind of bulldoze your way into that starting role, right?
Yeah. When I got there, it was essentially the coaches were saying, it's an open competition, but we had a starter last year that got hurt a little bit. And so we have 3 or 4 guys in the room that played last year due to injuries and different experiences. So there was a lot of experience in the room. I walked in there and I was the one. I had played in junior college, but I was the only one that hadn't played at Southern Utah as a quarterback. And so there were a few guys there that, they were stepping into it, knew what it was going to be like, had experienced the game at that level. And so it was a big opportunity for me and challenge for me to walk in and go, all right, this is who I am and this is what I can do. And that first year ended up redshirting. The first starter that had gotten hurt was the starter again, and ended up transferring at the end of the year. And so that was kind of the big open door for me, that it was, hey, this is really fair game now, and it's open for whoever wants to come take it. And so, yeah, just like Brandon was saying, is a lot of it just comes from your mindset and your willingness to do the work and grind. And that was kind of my mindset of it was, all right, I just got to do everything I can possibly do to win this job and to make the coaches say, we can't give it to somebody else, because this is he's the leader, trust him, and we trust him. And so that's our guy. We can't go with anybody else. And so I remember in our spring season, our spring ball and our kind of off season regiment was between a couple different coaches. We had spring competitions where, starting when we got back in the winter in January from Christmas break, we would start, and you'd kind of draft a team or get put on a team, and all right, you got to get the most points as you can. There was some kind of point system for every year, and you could get points through your academic work, through extra study hall hours, through winning competitions in the weight room or out on the field, all that kind of stuff. And so the way I approached those was the same way I wanted to approach a game. Was I got to do everything I can possibly do to win this, to win it for my team and personally. So if it was something I could do individually, I was doing as many points or getting as many points throughout the day and throughout each week as I could to help the team out. And if it was maxed at whatever point, 100 points a week, all right, I got to make sure I'm at 100 points a week. Because for me, if my teammates look at it and say, oh, well, our quarterback's only at 20 points this week, well, how's that going to look on me? And then who's going to follow me? Because I'm not doing as much as I can. And so I heard a quote or a press conference from Fernando Mendoza last week when he was doing his stuff with the Raiders now. And he was talking about how that kind of leadership is in some way earned. And it's not always just you walk in there and you can be the leader and people listen to you. Part of that comes from experiences with other guys, with your teammates, with your coaches, making sure that they know that you're up to the standard, that you can play at a certain level or you can compete at a certain level. And the other part of it is kind of that instinctual, I'm the guy, I'm going to lead. And so it kind of comes in two different waves where you can't always just walk in and expect people to listen to you. You kind of have to earn that respect and gain that leadership credibility. And so that was one way that I wanted to do that was, all right, my team has to win this. And whether it's personal points that you can get or the team points, my team has to win. And so that's kind of the way I approached it. My first off season at Southern Utah was, all right, let's get a team that whether we have great athletes or great students or whoever it was, we got a mix of everything. We have to win this. And so getting everybody on board was kind of the first step in my leadership experience and my my way really of winning the starting job there was, all right, how can I get everybody on board with this? And it was kind of a microcosm of what you're doing with it. How can I get the offense to listen to me and to buy in and figure out how we're going to get to where we want?
I think especially in football, but this also this translates into any team sport, I guess. But football is the ultimate team sport. I don't think there's anything where you depend more on a teammate than in football for your success. So in football, in particular, in quarterback, right, you've got to have several other guys do their jobs right for you to have any shot at looking good. And if not, you're getting sacked and throwing incompletions and interceptions, and you don't have a guy blocking for you. You don't have receivers running the right route. You're dropping passes. Like all these things have to go and have to work for you then to be the hero that the quarterback usually ends up being at the end of a win. And Fernando Mendoza's comment reminds me of two things. One is, Justin, you worked with Fernando. You trained with him. I stood next to you and Fernando Mendoza, and we did the same drills, and you did the same workouts with him just a couple years ago. And I remember walking away from that workout and did not for 1 second think Fernando Mendoza was the best quarterback on that field. I had you and 4 or 5 other Utah kids I trained that were all college quarterbacks. He was at Cal at the time. There was another kid from UCLA, and you were all good. But I did not walk away feeling like, well, yeah, they were all good, but that guy, holy cow, that dude's going to make it. He's going to. And then we fast forward 3 years, and he's playing in the national championship and making all this money. And now in the NFL, especially now, he's going to make all sorts of money. And it was sort of back to Brandon's point. He had an opportunity, right? The opportunity came up. He ended up in Indiana. The right circumstance presented itself, and he struck. He bounced, like Brandon said, and your opportunity worked out, but it wasn't at Indiana, and then now with the Raiders. But looking at what you did in Germany and what that's then led to, and now with your kids and your family and what you're doing with your life, the opportunity that did present yourself, you took advantage of it, right? And you pounced. And I think we can get caught saying, well, why did they get that chance or they get that chance, or the guy in front of me didn't get hurt, or I would have been the guy, or the only reason he played is because, look, we can't control any of that stuff. But all you can do is be ready for when your time comes and then be ready to shine when that time comes. And you don't know when it's going to. And that's the thing, is that you can do all the work and the door might never really open, but you've got to, if you really want it. I love what I keep going back to Brandon's, the heart believe point. I think there's so much to that you have to believe it so much that there is no negotiables. It's I'm doing this until the bitter end, no matter the pain, no matter the sacrifice. Somebody is going to tell me I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I'm not going to make that, I'm not going to quit before I've just emptied my tank. And if you still have 10% left in the tank, you empty it. And then when you're on empty, you're empty, and you walk away and you fill your tank in some other area of your life. But, in your case, Justin, you had to stay hungry. And what you did off the field, you said something there that I think is important. And Brandon maybe has a thought on this as well. Because you need your football teammates to perform, they're going to perform and play harder when they want to see you be successful. And when they feel like you're their guy and they respect you. And you see that in certain teams where there's a backup who the guys just love, man. If he goes in, they're all watching. They stand up from the bench and walk up to and they want to watch him play because they've seen him at practice, and they've seen him in the weight room, and they've seen him at team functions. And he's just the guy that's all in. And if he gets a chance to play, man, we want to see him. We want to see him kill it, right? He's our guy. If that guy's your quarterback and your linemen feel that way, where they're like, man, I don't know. I love all my quarterbacks, but this guy, man, if he ever gets a shot, he deserves it because this dude works his tail off. When you do get your shot, if you got those guys then kind of downshifting into, okay, we're going to make sure he gets in the end zone, or those receivers saying, oh man, I love this guy's been doing the extra work. I'm going to make sure that I run my heart, and they all pick it up a little bit better. You benefit. Really, and in order for you to benefit, they kind of need him to do that, because the alternative could be they say, oh, yeah, great, so-and-so's in. All right, like, man, this guy, he's a prima donna. He talks a good game, but he wasn't there when it was really hard. He wasn't there when it was cold, or when he was hurt a little bit, he'd sit out. He didn't, like, nah, man. And you get it, and then you don't get their best, and you don't perform. Brandon, you had the respect of the players in part, not just because of what you did at practice and things. They saw how hard you worked, but my guess is too, like, you were a dude, like, you hung out with them. You let them know who you were as a person, so they gravitated to you.
Yes. John, you keep making me think of a John Wooden's phrase that he called competitive greatness, being at your very best when your best is needed. And I think that is absolutely earned. And I think once you've made some great plays and you've prepared for it, then all of a sudden you make the plays and your teammates are like, yeah, this guy really can play. And you do it over and over again. The very best players in the world, their teammates are looking to them to be at their very best when their best is needed. And Steph Curry, for the most part, is at his very best when his best is needed. You're like, how did he make? Yeah. Well, that's when he's at his very, very best moment. And I think your teammates have to earn your trust. And Vince Lombardi talks about there has to be truth in your purpose and willpower in your character. And that's earned in so many ways. And that's you say when your teammates realize this is a guy that I love, this is a guy that I can hang out with, this is a guy that there really is truth in his purpose, and his purpose is us. It's not me, it's not him. His purpose is truthful. It's a purpose that we can trust and hang our hat on. This dude is about us. And why do I know that? Because there's willpower in his character. I can see that this guy is all about us, and the way that he trains, the way that he prepares, the way that he communicates to us in the huddle, the way he communicates to the team, so on and so forth. And the way Justin communicated, it's the greatest. It's the greatest opportunity that I could possibly imagine creating for somebody, to give them an opportunity to be a quarterback of a football team. It's just an amazing opportunity.
Well, Justin, I want to ask you one more question about your experience. And then I know you had a couple questions that you wanted to ask specific to quarterback. You wanted to play at BYU as well, right? That was kind of your goal growing up. And most kids here in Utah, where we live, playing at Rice-Eccles Stadium or Lavelle Edwards Stadium, or maybe up in Logan at Aggie Stadium. But specifically, I think Utah and BYU, that's every kid would like to, have that moment. And you did, Justin. You did get a play at BYU, just in another color uniform. And you threw a touchdown at Lavelle Edwards Stadium just for the other team. So tell us about how that was, not playing for BYU, scoring against BYU, running out of the opposite end tunnel. But what was that like for you, and how did that feel when you realized, man, I'm playing here, not on the team I thought I would, but I'm playing here, and then you did well in that game too. What was that feeling like for you?
It was pretty cool. I mean, growing up, most of my time in California, in Southern California, was a little bit different, where not a ton of kids down there were BYU fans, and that's what I grew up as, and my parents kind of instilled that in me, and it was my parents and all my grandparents, and you got generations that were all Cougars, and so it was just kind of like, I mean, similar to what Brandon was saying. That was kind of the pinnacle. That was where you were trying to get if you were playing football. And so for me growing up, I remember going to all their Las Vegas bowl games, and we would hang out and tailgate and do all that stuff. And so watching those games and growing up as a BYU fan in high school, it was tough on me, where I would go to the camps and wouldn't get looked at. And then coming out of high school, met with, it was Ty Detmer at the time was the offensive coordinator. And I mean, we had a good conversation where he said, listen, I mean, you could walk on, but you're probably going to be better off going to Snow and getting another look after that, because we just have a lot of guys here right now. And so you're probably not going to get the opportunity you want at this time. And I mean, so grateful for him to tell me that and be honest with me, because that sent my career in a whole different path. And so kind of once that mindset shifted of, all right, it might not be BYU, but I can still go play at another school and have a successful career. That kind of shifted it and said, all right, well, let me put my head down again and start grinding and get back to work. And then for it all, I mean, in my senior year too, for it to end up at BYU was kind of full circle for me. And I know my parents and grandparents and everybody that was there was kind of similar, where we thought you would be in blue and white playing here, but we're glad you ended up playing here at some point. And then, I mean, to throw a touchdown there, I remember my cousins were at BYU at the time, and they were up in the student section, and you could hear them scream as we scored. And they told me after, everybody was looking at them all funny. And then they said, well, the quarterback, so I kind of got to cheer for him. And they were all cool about it. But yeah, I mean, the thing that made it even better for me was that it was a nice touchdown. It wasn't just a wide open shot. It was a post over the top and hit him right at the back of the end zone. And so memorable in that sense, but also, just a really cool experience to play on the field and to finally get to play there after growing up for so long, kind of expecting or wanting to play there. That was my expectation on myself was to get there. And so to be able to play in some of those bigger stadiums at Lavelle Edwards and Rice Eccles and down at Arizona State a couple times, those were pretty special.
Well, I loved it, man. I was just like it's a different feeling with you than it was with Brandon. Brandon is still to this day one of my very best friends. But with you, I trained you, since 8th or 9th grade. And I don't know, very few quarterbacks I've worked with more than you, or as much as you, just a handful. So, I mean, it was for us, your parents, your fans, your friends like me, that it was pretty dang cool, man, to see you. And then I was cheering for Southern Utah in that game. People ask me if I'm a BYU fan or a Utah fan. I said, I'm a fan of the quarterback. If he's a kid I worked with, that's all I care about. I want to see him do well. Or if one of my buddies is coaching. When Brandon was at BYU and when Ty was at BYU, I was a BYU fan. But as soon as they left, and then only if one of my guys is playing. Otherwise, I don't really care. Justin, you had a couple questions specific to quarterbacks. Fire those away, and I'll let Brandon answer them. If I have anything, I'll say, but I'll speak up. But why don't you fire away a couple questions?
Yeah, I think the first one kind of been on my mind for a little bit. I was reading a the Bill Belichick book. I think he came out with it last year, and some really insightful information throughout the whole book. But one chapter has really stuck out to me about mistakes and how, I mean, we're going to make mistakes all the time. And he talks about the biggest, the most important thing that you can say after you make a mistake is first to own it, and then to tell those involved that you messed it up. He used a little more colorful language, but we'll keep it with that, hey, I messed that up. That's on me. My question for Brandon and you, Dustin, too, is as a quarterback, we have so much responsibility to run the offense, to win games, to do all this different stuff. And I've heard and been coached in a lot of ways when I was really young as a quarterback. You always tell receivers, my bad. Like, hey, that one's on me. I didn't put it in the right spot, even if it wasn't. And so my question for you guys would be, how do you kind of balance that accountability where you still want to be real and you want to be honest about things? And in some ways, I think guys get a little hesitant to be that honest because they think my coach is going to yell at me. Maybe he doesn't know that it actually wasn't my fault. And so how do we balance that as quarterbacks and take responsibility, be accountable, but also be realistic in what we're expecting from our teammates as well?
I think if you hold yourself to a high standard, and we've spent all this time talking about what the expectation is of ourselves and the way that we're going to do the work. If you demonstrate that over time, they recognize this guy's running at this level. And he's now expecting us to run at that level with him. And some guys have the ability to raise the intensity, raise the expectation of all their teammates. And that happens day after day, week after week, month after month of just staying at it. Like I said about this Vince Lombardi quote, that leadership rests not only upon the ability or the capacity of the player or the person. There has to be truth in your purpose and willpower in your character, and they have to be combined. If there's truth in your purpose and then you combine that with this unbelievable willpower in your character as a leader, those guys are going to respond to you. So when they go the wrong direction or run the wrong route and it really hurts the team, they're not expecting you to degrade them or to make them feel lesser of a human being. They're expecting you to hold them to a level of accountability of this outcome, this successful outcome that you're expecting. And in most cases, it enables these guys to rise to the occasion. I look back at some of my teammates that were so dang good. I think they expected me to hold them to that standard. And if they weren't there, I think they were expecting me to say, hey, listen, we have to be different. We can't keep doing this. And if I wasn't saying that, I think they had been so disappointed, right? I think they had come to recognize and expect that, hey, Brandon's going to require this level of expectation. And if we're not hearing it from him, then, man, something's wrong. And that even required more out of me. And so when Bill Belichick says, hey, look, I own it. I own my mistakes. When you said, Justin, I owned it. I knew what my role was, and I had to fulfill that role. And if it was 100 points, I had to get 100 points. You earned the right. You earned the right, and when you earn that right, then you have complete trust and confidence from your teammates. It's the same thing as a father. I mean, gosh, you have to earn the right as a dad to be able to communicate to your family that way and hold them to that expectation. And what an awesome thing to learn as a young quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, super important we have to be accountable, right? And that's one of the things that I think separates a lot of quarterbacks and people in general from others is owning mistakes where, I mean, as I was reading in there, it's kind of, you're going through it and you're like, yeah, I can own my mistakes. And in theory, it's all nice. You can always do it. But then it comes up in a real life situation and you're like, I might be a little more hesitant to say something right away, or maybe it's not even owning it right in the moment, where it's okay, I can wait maybe an hour or a day or something, and then I can say, yeah, that was my fault, I did that, and try to wait for everybody to cool off a little bit, where you got to be able to do it in the moment and step up. I think probably last question for you, Brandon, is when you were coaching at BYU, and kind of goes along with E4A and our quarterback elite stuff, what were you looking for specifically in your quarterbacks when you were recruiting them, in terms of physical ability, but also mental ability? And how did you kind of get that out of the quarterbacks that you were recruiting? I mean, it's a little easier now where there's so much more media available, and different ways of kind of going about recruiting. But for you, I mean, how did you go about it? What were you looking for? And kind of how did you extract what you were looking for out of these?
There were tangibles. There were certainly tangibles we were looking for. They had to have the ability to play. They had to be able to stand in a Division I huddle and in a Division I locker room and on a Division I field, and they had to be able to make the throws. They had to be able to run. They had to be able to do all the things physically that were required of them. It wasn't necessarily whether or not they were 5'10" or 6'5". It just was, can they do it physically? And that's why you went to all those camps. That's why these guys would show up at your high schools to evaluate that. But then it got really important. And we were trying to figure out, I was trying to figure out, does this guy have a ferocious competitiveness? Does he have this competitive grit about him? I've said it, I keep using the word grit, but I want to find someone with grit. Grit was, to me, is this ability to have, greatness comes from this individual toughness, this stick-to-itiveness that when I get knocked down, I'm going to be the first one up. And the quarterback has to be that guy. He really has to be that guy. As goes the quarterback, so goes the team. And you watch any team at any level. If that guy has that type of grit, stick-to-itiveness, and then he can play, I felt like we could coach him into being a well-rounded player. I felt like it was my duty and my responsibility to take that guy. Now he's got the tangibles and the intangibles. If I failed to coach him to be great, that was on me as a coach. If he wasn't performing well, I feel like that was my fault. And I had to own that as a coach. And I would way rather have to bring a guy down that has this level of confidence in himself and his ability to be great in those moments and kind of have to taper that back a little bit than to try and figure out how to build him into that person. And you have that luxury in college where you can go find those guys. And I think you could find 2 or 3 of them and put them in the cupboards and start breeding that type of a culture and environment. And I look back as a coach, and I think we had a lot of guys like that, and it had to do with recruiting the right people to be there.
Brandon, I know you got to get running real quick. I don't want to keep you late from your mission, or from your meeting. So why don't you hop off, and then Justin will.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon.
Go ahead, Josh. Sorry, he's got to get to this meeting.
Oh, you're good. Going along with that is you're looking for a lot of tangible things, and there's kind of a baseline that you have to be able to reach as a quarterback or any athlete, that, all right, I got to be up to this standard physically to be able to do things. And then that mental side is really where it comes into play of, can this guy process information? Can he make decisions and make consistently good? And in this instance of quarterbacks, does he know the playbook inside and out? Does he know where everybody else is supposed to be and what's supposed to be done, even up to the offensive line on run plays and pass protection and stuff like that? So I think Brandon was spot on. And I mean, he recruited a lot of good quarterbacks. So
he did. And I would add to that if you're a quarterback who thinks that you have what it takes to be at the next level, well, let's back it up. Let's just say you think you should be the high school guy. And all these guys, who are coming to camps and doing the trainings and whatever, think that they should be the high school quarterback. If you're going to be a high school quarterback, in 2026. There's a lot more expected of you than there was, I think, in 2006. The game's changed. The quarterback is way more involved in decision making and has to do a lot more back in just the way the game is played offensively. And you have to be tough. You have to be gritty. You have to have all these things. You have to have a good arm. All these things if you want to be really good. But even if you just want to play it all, there's some minimums you have to be able to do. You have to be a guy that your teammate knows, or your coaches and teammates know does the extra. You got to know your offense, and you got to know basic understanding of defenses. If you're going into your sophomore, junior year and you can't get up on a whiteboard and explain the core 3 or 4 defenses that you're going to see by 80% of the plays from high school teams you're playing against, and then know which one of your plays work against those and which ones maybe not aren't going to work, and what your reads are, and if that's something you don't really think is important, I can tell you, Justin, from training QBs all these years, there's a lot of them who, when it comes to that stuff, they just go blank-faced on me, and they just want to go out and throw touchdown passes. And they think that if they just work on their arm strength or go to 1,000,000 7-on-7 tournaments, that they'll just go out there and throw touchdown passes. And what they don't understand is that when you get in real football and a team has seen film on you for 2 weeks and the way you run your offense and the decisions that you make, and maybe know some of the tendencies that you have, if you see a certain thing or have a rush against you, what you throw off balance or you're late to certain throws, they'll try to put you in those situations so that you fail. And your understanding of all of the game, not just you have a good arm and you can drop back and throw a post route, but understanding how to handle adversity, how to handle bounce back from mistakes, how to handle being criticized from a coach. Because sometimes your coach is going to get frustrated. And if you're going to play the QB position, ball's in your hand every play. They are going to be, no matter what, I promise you, times when your coach gets frustrated with you. And he's going to, and at the same time, I think good coaches give a lot of rope to their QBs, a lot of slack, right? Like they get it. They understand it's a hard position and you're going to make mistakes. But if you're just making mistakes, that's different than the mistake of being lazy. That's not a mistake. That was a choice that you made to be lazy. Not to go to a workout, not to lift, not to study your playbook. And then you come out and show that error in a game. That's where your coach is going to be pretty frustrated. And honestly, that's on you. Like, you deserve that. You're the one who wants all the attention and the fame that comes with being the quarterback. And it's awesome. And that's good. Go. And you want to be the leader. You want to be the dude. And that's awesome. We need those guys. And you have to have a little bit of that mindset of, I'm going to be the quarterback. I'm the dude, because everybody would like to be. But you've gone for it, right? And that's okay. But if you're going to accept that or expect a coach to give you that opportunity, then you owe it to your teammates and to your coach to be ready and to know what you're doing when you get back there. And then if you make a mistake, you make a mistake, because you're going to, right? But it's not from lack of preparation or paying attention. It's just because you underthrew a pass. That happens at every level, every game. You overthrew a guy. You made the wrong read. You can come off the field, coach, I made the wrong read. And coach can look at it and say, yeah, you did. And all right, why? And you can talk through it. But why did you make the wrong read? And you say, I don't know. Well, what coverage are they in? I have no clue, coach. Well, what route was he supposed to run there? Why didn't you check out of it? Why didn't you do this? Right? Well, did you see the backside with one-on-one and you don't know anything he's talking about? That's on you, right? That's a mark against you. And forget college, if that's a thing. Like, at the college level, Brandon or any of these other coaches that I know that are college coaches, they're going to look for a reason not to recruit you, because they get a bowl full of 30 really good quarterbacks, and they're picking from that bowl, and they're looking and they're, man, all these guys can play. They all run. They all throw well. They all came from good teams and good offenses. So what's a reason not to recruit this kid? And they're looking for, and it could be something as simple as, his coach said he really doesn't put a lot of time in the film room. Or I heard from somebody he doesn't hang out with his teammates. He kind of has his own other thing that he's not really involved with the team in a team setting. That might be a red flag. It would for me if I were recruiting a kid. I want him to want to be with, and to create that bond. What his grades, right? If you get really bad grades, but maybe really high SAT or ACT scores, well, that tells me something about you. You didn't put in the work to get good grades, but you're a smart kid, clearly, because you had a pretty good ACT score. You just didn't want to do your homework because you probably were playing video games or other things. Like, there's all these things that they're going to look for, and then they're going to whittle that down to 3 or 4 guys. And then they're going to show that film to all the coaches, and everybody's going to look and just make a decision on a kid. But most of all you can do as a quarterback is control the controllables, and you have to make sure that you're elite in those controllables. And if you just want to kind of do it, you can't play quarterback. You got to play another position. You know that. Like there's way too much to go into that position to just sort of be ready. You can't be kind of ready.
Yep, there's way too much. And I think going back to what you were talking about, just being able to explain defenses and knowing your offense, knowing defenses, things like that. I remember I was probably in 8th grade or around there, just kind of before we had moved to Utah pretty soon. And I had decided I really was dedicated. I want to play quarterback now. And so we started working with somebody down in California, and about, 6 months or so in, and I had a lot of experience, and I should have known probably more than I did at the time, but we sat down in a classroom or on a whiteboard, and he started asking me questions of, all right, what's our read here? What do we like against cover 3? What do we prefer against cover 2? What are the weaknesses of all this stuff? And there were too many times where I hesitated and said, I'm not sure. And I know he was disappointed with me because he had a higher expectation. And from that point on, it was kind of, all right, I need to figure this out. There can't be a time when a coach comes up and asks me this thing and I don't have an answer for him, or I hesitate and can't draw it up exactly right, or the way he wants me to. And he had expressed that to me as well, was, listen, at some point you're going to have a coach say, all right, get up on the board, and you got to be able to do what he needs you to do or answer the question that he has for you. And I mean, throughout high school and then certainly throughout college, that happened a ton, right? Like when you're in college, that's most of your meeting days is, all right, let's talk about this. We'll install stuff, but now we got to draw it up on the board, and we got to learn defenses. We got to dive into really what is this defense this week doing to us, and now let's talk about it up on the board. And if you struggle with that, coaches notice that, and that trust level drops a little bit. And kind of promised myself, all right, that's not going to happen anymore. Like this was my kind of awakening to it, and I know, all right, I'm not very good with this right now. And it wasn't necessarily I didn't know it, but it was expressing how I come across, right? Like if you know the answer, but you can't explain it to somebody, is that much good for you? Where if you might know it, but in crunch time, when we need you up there, are you going to be able to really know it? If your receiver comes over to you and says, hey, what route do I have here? And you hesitate and take 10 seconds to think about it, you might know it and it might come to you, but now the play clock's gone and we got to call a timeout. And so little things like that make a huge difference. And I mean, back to your point of they're looking for ways to kind of cross you off their board in recruiting. That's a huge one. If you don't know that stuff, and if they ever quiz you, they come over to your school and ask you something and you sit there and go, I'm not really sure, or takes a little bit to kind of process what they're saying, they put a big X right next to your name and move on to the next guy.
It's so true. It's that way, I think, in every sport and at every level. The expectation in certain positions, even more so, the expectation's greater, and you got to do your part, and then you got to, let it fly and see what happens. And there's no guarantees that if you do everything right, you're going to get the reward. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. It's not how life works. I wish I could say that if you did all those things and you knew how to do all those things and understood every defense and all your plays and could draw it up, and whether that's basketball or football or whatever the sport is, and you knew everything, that you would be guaranteed success in playing time. You're more likely to get it, but I can't guarantee you're going to get it. It's unfortunately the coach may go with somebody else, but at least you gave it all you had, and it just didn't work out. That's an easier pill to swallow than you were given a chance and you weren't ready and you blew it. And so I think that's my message to everybody. be ready when the moment comes, and then do your very best. But your very best, you won't know what your very best is if you're not ready when that moment comes, if you haven't prepared, and that regret of, well, I think I had more, I could have been better. Well, yeah, but it's over now. So be ready, do your very best when the time comes, and then live with the result. And then, sometimes know when it's time to move on to the next thing, which you're having to do now. I had to do it. Brandon had to do it. We all at some point have to close chapters and open up new chapters in a book, just in our life. And, but for those kids listening to this, you got a chance to be an athlete, play on a team, be ready, do all the work that's necessary, and then some, and find out what's necessary. Make sure you know what's necessary. Ask your coaches, and then ask them what extra you can do, and then do it, so that the coach and your teammates see that you do it, and then they'll respect you. They'll be happy when you do have successes. They'll want to see you be successful, and you have a much better shot of, not only of playing, but playing well and having your teammates play well for you, because they want to win for you, because they respect you. But that's earned. So, well, everybody keep your eyes up, do the work.
Thank you for joining the Especially for Athletes podcast. To learn more about Especially for Athletes organization, get a copy of our book, The Sportlight, or to bring our program to your team, school, business, or organization, visit us at especiallyforathletes.org.